From the very beginning, I have experienced some intense anxiety, and I thought that that was something I could attribute to autism. And although that's partially true, it doesn't tell the whole story. I was still feeling very anxious even after I was coming out and being more open about my autism. I finally reached a breaking point in February 2025 when my anxiety went from difficult to handle to absolutely unbearable. I didn't know, however, what was causing the anxiety, which really worried me. But it was months after I had began to come out as autistic, and I just didn't know what else could be there wreaking havoc inside my mind. But it got to a point where I could just ignore it no longer. But the problem was I couldn't really describe it either. So when I went to see some doctors and trained professionals about what I could be potentially suffering from in addition to autism, some of them thought that I was suffering from psychosis or delusions. But when I took the medications to curb both of those things, they weren't effective. So I knew it could not have been those. And then finally, I got an answer that seemed plausible. One of my therapists eventually suggested that I may have obsessive compulsive disorder or OCD. Even though I had thought that this was a possibility since childhood, I never seriously considered it because all I had been taught about OCD was that it's a disorder that is about being excessively tidy or organized. It's definitely portrayed that way in popular media, but that is a gross, gross misunderstanding of what OCD actually is. And I'll just tell you, I don't speak for every person with comorbid autism and OCD, but in my opinion, living with autism is difficult. Living with OCD is torture. I know that there are better definitions for OCD, but the way I can best describe it is when your mind is absolutely inundated with these distressing, unwanted thoughts. And in response to those thoughts, you perform compulsions or actions that help relieve the tension and stress that you are feeling as a result of those intrusive thoughts or obsessions. But by performing the compulsions, you actually make the OCD even stronger and you just go down this vicious cycle, and it really is deteriorating for your physical and mental health. So I want to imagine this for a second. You have this very distressing, unwanted thought that you have run someone over and you didn't even realize it. You weren't aware of it at the time. You weren't aware of it once you stopped driving. But now you just start to think, oh man, I just ran someone over and I didn't even realize it, even though there's no evidence pointing in that direction. For people with OCD, this tiny bit of uncertainty can be absolutely devastating. And as a result, we perform things like checking the news or driving past that particular spot where you thought you may have hit someone. Those are compulsions. And it doesn't do anything to help. You don't feel any better, even if there's no evidence suggesting that you hit someone. But instead, it makes the OCD even stronger and you continue to doubt yourself. Looking back on it, I have had these thoughts, these very distressing, intrusive thoughts for at least 17 or 18 years of my 26 plus year life. But it was only then in 2025 where I began to have some thoughts so distressing, especially when it comes to, thinking that I had harmed someone without even realizing it. It was only then when I realized that I had to do something about it because at that point, the OCD was so strong that I was thinking, if my mind is telling me this, there's got to be something to it. There is no reason why my mind would be telling me that I did something so horrible if I didn't do it, despite the fact that there's no evidence that any of the things that are in this intrusive thought have actually happened. But at this point in my life, I was really down, and not just down, I mean, I felt depressed and I was really scared that my life was over as I knew it, that the police were going to come into my house and break down the door, and then they're going to put on handcuffs saying, you did this. And I'm like, what? I finally got an official OCD diagnosis in July of 2025. And I wasn't just diagnosed with OCD, I was diagnosed with severe OCD. And my first course of action after that was to get this gold standard treatment for OCD. It's called exposure and response prevention therapy, or ERP therapy. And in a nutshell, it tries to tame the OCD by forcing you not to perform compulsions whenever you have these intrusive thoughts. And unfortunately, I have to say that despite trying ERP for roughly 8 plus months or so, I'm still doing these compulsions that I've known I'm not supposed to perform since day one of ERP. For example, like I have this contamination OCD, so I am absolutely terrified of touching a dirty doorknob, for example. So I will go to whatever lengths to not touch the dirty doorknob. And if I don't have a choice, like I'll use my shirt to open the door. And in addition to that, anytime I touch something that I think is dirty, I wash my hands excessively. And in addition to that, much of the anxiety that I experienced when I first got diagnosed with OCD, it's gotten even worse, or at the very least, hasn't progressed at all, even after months of ERP. And so, this is all to say that navigating both autism and OCD have been very difficult for me. And had if you have been diagnosed with comorbid autism and OCD, I understand the struggles that you are going through. And I'm here to tell you that you are not alone. And I support you. And I hope that things get better for you. And I don't just understand your experience of what it's like having to deal with both autism and OCD on a daily basis. It's also that I understand having to navigate a very indifferent society when it comes to these issues. So if you have autism and OCD, I encourage you to come forward and talk about your experiences because if you continue to hold on to your experiences and not be open about them to other people, it's going to be very difficult for them to understand you, let alone take action to help you live better lives. I think that it's important for us to stop being scared of the stigma surrounding both autism and OCD and neurodivergence in general. Because if we're more open about our experiences, then I believe it's possible for us to design policies and reshape expectations in ways that are healthy for us and allow us to live the most fulfilling lives possible.